Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the July 26, 2023 Jefferson County Planning Commission. Planning Commission is made up of 9 members who reside in Jefferson County. 7 are regular members and 2 of those members are alternates. This Planning Commission process is a quasi-judicial hearing. The commission members have not had any conversations with each other, the applicant, or staff members outside of the hearing room regarding the cases on tonight's agenda. The role of the Planning Commission is to review the staff reports, visit the sites, review the correspondence received from the community, and provide to the Board of County Commissioners a recommendation for approval or denial. Our host for tonight's events is Kat Albler. Sitting to my left is the Director of Planning Commission, Mr. Chris O'Keefe, and next to Chris O'Keefe is Nick Nelson, the Supervisor of Planners. On the dais with me today is the Kathy Attorney, the Assistant County Attorney, and at the end of the dais is our Executive Secretary, Kimmy Schellinger.
Case number 23-108937 SA, a location and extent. The case name is Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport. Oh, sorry, this case was continued from May 24th, 2023. The owner applicant is Jefferson County. The location is 9107 and 9108 Rocky Road, 11755 Airport Way, 11886 Sims Street, 9769 West 119th Drive, and 3 additional parcels. The purpose is to define lot and building standards for the Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport. The case manager is Sara Hutchinson.
Thank you, Kimmy. Is there anyone in the hearing room with us tonight that would like to make comments on this case? Very good. We'll move that case to the regular agenda. It will be the first item heard on the regular agenda. Kimmy, would you like to read the second item on the consent agenda into the record, please?
Next is 23-110506 SA, a location and extent. The case name is Verve Signage. The owner applicant is Verve Metro District Number 1 in Jefferson County. The location is tracks A, B, and E, and Lot 1 of Verve Innovation Park Filing 4. The approximate area is 348.18 acres. The purpose is to allow entry feature signs larger than permitted by the zoning resolution. And the case manager is Reed Powers.
Thank you, Kimmy. Is there anyone in the hearing room with us tonight that would like to move this item on to the consent agenda? Thank you, sir. We have an individual in the hearing room that's indicated their interest in moving the second item on the consent agenda onto the regular agenda, and that will be the second item on the regular agenda. Kimmy, would you like to read the first item that we've moved to the regular agenda from the consent agenda into the record, please?
Yes, so this is case number 23-108937 SA, a location and extent, which was continued from May 24th, 2023. The case name is Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport. The owner applicant is Jefferson County. The location is 9107 and 9108 Rocky Road, 11755 Airport Way, 11886 Sim Street, 9769 West 119th Drive, and 3 additional parcels. The purpose is to define lot and building standards for the Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport, and the case manager is Sara Hutchinson.
Thank you, Kimmy. Sara, would you like to take us through the case?
Yes, let me pull up the presentation. All right. Good evening. My name is Sara Hutchinson, and tonight I will be presenting the location and extent for the Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport. This site is located off of West 120th Avenue and Wadsworth Parkway, and it is zoned planned development. Most of the surrounding area is outside of Jefferson County zoning. North and east are the city and county of Broomfield, which includes the Ball Aerospace PUD and Jeffco Airport Business Center East PUD. South is the city of Westminster, which does include golf course and business park. And west of the site is Jefferson County within the same planned development zone district as this site. That governing official development plan for the site is called the Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport, ODP, Amendment Number 2, and allows for aviation and aviation adjacent uses. The site is already developed. Shown here are 2 areas off of Airport Way within the site. This proposal is to allow an update to the lot and building standards for aviation uses and development. There is an existing site approval plan for 2015 to 2024 that was approved in 2016. It references specific capital projects and development areas. However, this has been limiting as the airport reprioritizes capital projects and their needs evolve. The new location and extent provides better flexibility to Jefferson County in responding quickly to the need for new airfield projects. Corresponding written restrictions provide guidance to planning and zoning and RMMA staff. The location and extent criteria are seen here. Please note that the Planning Commission has the final vote for location and extent cases, and the Board of County Commissioners does not review this case type. Now I'm going to go through each of these items for this proposal with our staff analysis. Staff has determined that the proposed RMMA uses and development are compatible with the existing land uses in the surrounding area. The airport has been operating since 1960, and this location and extent does not expand the boundaries of the airport. Staff concludes that the subject request is in general conformance with the applicable goals and policies of the Comprehensive Master Plan. Those 4 factors are shown here. The first is land use. The location and extent area is within Area 23 and 24 of the North Plains Area Plan of the Comprehensive Master Plan. Area 23 is recommended for Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport uses, and Area 24 is recommended for industrial uses. The proposal does not conflict with the policies in these areas. For physical constraints, there are no geological hazards or floodplains on the property. There are 3 areas within the airport boundary identified as maximum quality wildlife habitat. It appears that these are riparian areas associated with intermittent streams, and 2 of these areas are identified as wetlands. The Comprehensive Master Plan states that the wetland areas should be avoided if possible. If not, appropriate mitigation should be provided. All new development and airfield projects at RMMA go through the federal NEPA process, which addresses wetlands and any environmental concerns. RMMA also has an active migratory bird depredation permit with the Federal Fish and Wildlife Service for the purposes of reducing hazards from birds on the airfield. Staff has no concerns related to the physical constraints of the subject property and finds the proposal in conformance with the physical constraints section of the Comprehensive Master Plan. For community resources, there are no known historic resources identified on the property. The property is not within a visually sensitive area. Airports inherently have impacts to noise and light, which is why the 2011 Airport Master Plan includes a section about land use recommendations outside of the airport boundaries. Additionally, there is a policy in the Comprehensive Master Plan that discusses maintaining the viability of necessary, less desirable land uses by ensuring adjacent land uses are compatible. The airport has been operating since 1960, and this LNE does not expand those boundaries. For infrastructure, water, and services, there are no concerns with the existing roadway infrastructure, water availability, and wastewater services for the proposed location and extent. The City and County of Broomfield provides water and sewer services for Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport. The project is within the North Metro Fire Rescue District boundaries. And the fire district has stated that they are the fire department and emergency rescue and medical service provider for this site. The Jefferson County Sheriff's Office provides law enforcement services to this property. Negative impacts are not anticipated with this proposal. Staff is not concerned with noise impacts adjacent to active airport runways. Any new structures and their operational activities, such as taxiing, maintenance, and storage of aircrafts, will have the same or less noise impact as the existing hangars and airport operations. Staff also finds that there will be no additional visual impact to the surrounding community. The applicant has provided evidence showing the City and County of Broomfield provides water and sewer services. The North Metro Fire Rescue District provides emergency rescue and fire protection services, and the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office provides law enforcement services. Staff has no concerns with the adequacy of the infrastructure and public services available. The proposed project is not anticipated to negatively impact the health, safety, and welfare of the residents and landowners in the surrounding area. The applicants posted 6 signs on the property facing the right-of-way. Jefferson County mailed postcards to neighboring properties within the required radius of 500 feet and notified all nearby HOAs in conformance with Jefferson County policies and regulations. Staff has received comments from the community regarding the proposal. One comment questioned the need for a potential phase 1 environmental assessment, which staff had deferred to public health, who did not require one. In addition, the NEPA process is part of all projects at the airport. The town of Superior also asked about a few topics, including our notification requirements. In summary, the proposed location and extent is compatible with the existing and allowed industrial and airport uses at the Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport and with the properties in the surrounding area. The proposal is in general conformance with the comprehensive master plan because it meets the goals and policies in all applicable sections. The impacts of the proposed location and extent upon the property and the surrounding area were considered and found to be negligible. The proposed location and extent has available and adequate water and wastewater services, law enforcement services, fire and rescue services. It also has adequate infrastructure and services available. It will not result in significant impacts to the health, safety, and welfare of the residents and landowners in the surrounding area. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve case number 23-108937 SA. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Hutchinson. We'll now give the applicant up to 20 minutes to present his case to the community and the Planning Commission. Procedure: when you provide testimony, whether you're the applicant or an individual, you'll have to be sworn in by our executive secretary, Kimmy Schillinger. So in this case, the applicant's consultant will be sworn in, and that involves you giving us your first and your last name, your address, and then Kimmy will swear you in.
Okay. I'm Benjamin Miller. I'm the planner for the airport. I'll give my work address, 11755 Airport Way, Broomfield, Colorado.
And for the record, could you spell your last name?
Miller.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you. Please raise your right hand. Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give in the matter before this commission is the whole truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Miller, you have 20 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I am not going to add much to the presentation that Ms. Hutchinson gave. I think, as a fellow staff member of Jefferson County, she summarized pretty much why we are seeking this location and extent, and summarized the case very well. I would only add that we're here today. We're governed by a location and extent from 2016, as well as an official development plan from 2020 that basically lays out what we can do on the airport. The only reason we came up with this new one is we found a couple, so there's a map, as she referenced, that references capital improvement projects and specific development areas that was worked up in 2016, and that map is now out of date. There's projects that we have no intention to continue and are no longer on our CIP. We have new CIP projects that are not on that map. So just this is coming to you for 2 reasons. One, so that when we're coming up with CIP projects, we can kind of be flexible about what happens year over year, because sometimes a taxiway fails and we need to add that within the next 5 years, and it wasn't on a location and extent. That happened recently. The other reason is, depending on developments at the airport, some happen to be in those development areas and some do not, and it kind of creates an unfair or an unequal treatment for hangar developers. So if one's on it, they go through a certain process, and if one is 50 feet off of the blob of development area, as shown on that map from 2016, they go through a different development process. And so we made the call to just highlight the entire area that's covered by the official development plan of 2020 as all aeronautical uses, so that all development is treated the same and that staff can be kind of flexible with the CIP going forward.
For the purpose of clarity, can you explain what that acronym is that you're using
CIP?
CIP.
Sorry, Capital Improvement Program.
Thank you.
Our taxiways and runways and apron projects for the next 5 to 10 years.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Does that complete your presentation?
Yes.
Thank you. We'll now open up the hearing for comments from the community.
My name is Kevin Ryan. I am your neighbor. I'm a resident of Superior, pro-business advocate, airplane lover, husband, father, and former elected trustee in Superior. Tonight, you're considering what is effectively a material expansion to the airport. And since it was originally on the consent agenda, I suspect you're a bit surprised that there's a few of us here to speak. We're also surprised. I'm not a current trustee, and I didn't run during the last election, but I did meet with the candidates, and they all asked good questions. What was the most important thing that I learned as an elected official? It took me a minute when I was first elected to find the right approach. In business, you want to go fast. There are at least 20 business books on the virtue of going fast, and failing often. With land use, it's the opposite. It's better to go slow in the right direction than fast in the wrong direction. I'm going to say that again. It is better to go slow in the right direction than to go fast in the wrong direction. You are moving quickly in the wrong direction. Now, I only learned about this meeting a couple days ago. That surprises me because, well, I'm your neighbor and I'm paying attention. You have 3 choices tonight. You can approve, you could delay until a date certain, or you could deny. I'm asking you to deny this application and have the applicant return with a revised proposal, taking into consideration feedback from the adjacent communities, not just Superior, and your own public health department. A couple examples. Number 1, this application is filled with misrepresentations. The very first representation that you heard this evening affirms compatibility with existing and allowable land uses in the surrounding areas. My wife and I purchased our home in 2005. As part of the title documents, which I have with me, an avigation agreement was included which specifically restricts the airport from expansion into freight, amongst other representations. For this reason alone, I don't know how you could approve this application when that is clearly the intent. Number 2, this whole application repeatedly references this as having, quote, a negligible impact to surrounding communities. What? For years, our residents have been going to meetings at RMMA to highlight the risks associated with noise, overflight, and recently lead contamination. This is not negligible impact. Number 3, grave concerns about the health and safety and welfare of the residents in the surrounding areas. Director Anslow completed your required Form 6000 and signed, with the penalty of perjury, I may add. Adjacent properties are, quote, commercial, light industrial, vacant office building. Superior's Coyote Ridge open space is literally steps away from this space.
Mr. Ryan, your 3 minutes have expired. Could I ask you to summarize your comments? It looks like there's a number of people that would like to offer their testimony tonight.
Thank you.
So,
The third issue in an email correspondence today, Jeffco's environmental engineer indicated that a phase 1 environmental site assessment is a reasonable request. I'm your neighbor. I'm not anti-airport. With this expansion, we need to do this right. In order to do so, you need to go slow. Thank you.
thank you for your comments. Mr. Ryan, hold on for a second. Do we have any questions from the Planning Commission for Mr. Ryan? Thank you for your comments.
My name is Carlyn Tilley. It's Karlyn Tilley. I grew up in Jefferson County and work here, but I am a resident of Rock Creek in Superior. We are just northwest of the airport. I've lived there for 6 years, and I did know I was moving close to a small regional airport. But that small airport has now turned into a place with planes taking off over my house from approximately 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. every day. We can no longer sleep with the windows open due to the noise. We hosted a barbecue in our backyard a little while ago and had to move everyone inside because we literally could not hear the person standing next to us talking because of the constant barrage of planes that were doing touch and goes in the area around our house. My husband is a realtor, and the main feedback now that he gets from when he does open houses in our neighborhood is about the deafening noise of the airplanes. And if you don't believe me, you are welcome to come to my house anytime and hear for yourself. This is hurting our property values. It is hurting our lifestyle. It is also hurting our health and our children, as recent reports are now providing statistical data about the lead poisoning coming from the smaller planes and raining down into our neighborhood. At the very least, you could force the airport to develop different takeoff and landing patterns so that the majority of the noise goes over the sparsely populated Rocky Flats instead of our densely populated community. I admit that I did not have time to read the entire 233-page report attached to the agenda in preparation for this meeting tonight, since I only found out about this yesterday. So granted, I may have missed part about notifications, but I would like to point out that on page 80, it states that notice for this proposal was provided to the cities of Westminster and Broomfield and to homeowners associations located within a 1-mile radius. Maybe we are just barely outside of that 1-mile radius. I'm not quite sure. But I can only speculate that the small radius for that notification was chosen so the airport would not have to notify those of us in Superior about this meeting. And I say that because our community has been quite vocal about these new ongoing noise issues and health concerns. I do not think that it is a coincidence that members of the airport are holding a meeting right now at this same time in Superior for residents, as you concurrently sit here ready to make major decisions that will impact our future. I have no doubt that you would have many more people here objecting had we been notified properly. This master plan talks about expanding runways for much larger commercial airplanes. While commercial airplanes do use unleaded gas, there is certainly no way to say the large, loud commercial engines will not make a significant impact to the health, safety, and welfare of the residents and landowners in the surrounding areas. I respect and understand that you are here to look out for the best interests of the people in Jefferson County. But I do urge you to please take your neighbors to the north, those of us in Boulder County and specifically in Superior, into consideration before allowing this airport to expand services and make our once quiet and peaceful neighborhood unlivable.
Thank you for your testimony. Do we have any questions for the speaker?
May I say one last thing?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. 2 years ago, the Marshall Fire came through and devastated large portions of our community. We have had enough heartbreak. So please, please do not devastate our community again with decisions that are well within your control when that was not in our control. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
My name is Neil Shaw, and I'm the Mayor Pro Tem of the town of Superior. Many do not realize it, but the town of Superior is actually in both Jefferson and in Boulder County. The town submitted referral comments as referenced earlier today, as we only learned about this hearing on Monday. The edge of the airport is actually within 500 feet of the edge of Superior's boundary with Coyote Ridge, as mentioned earlier, and we should have received notice, but we did not. Nevertheless, before I comment, I want to give you a little bit of my background. I grew up in Arvada. I went to elementary school, high school at A West. It was only in 2000 that my parents decided, as empty nesters, that they wanted a bigger house, and they wanted to move somewhere within Arvada because we'd been there for over 20 years. Unfortunately, they only found a home in Superior, so that's how they ended up in Superior. Their number one concern in 2000 was the airport, which was Jefferson County's airport at the time. It was called Jefferson County Airport, and it was only 1.5 miles away. The developer assured them that they would be held to specific limits of growth due to the avigation agreement that they struck with the developer in between the airport. These limits specifically prohibited any freight traffic and imposed other constraints on both communities. Notwithstanding the fact that most airports are located in the middle of a county to avoid this sort of concern over the long-term growth of the airport, I believe that the airport and the builder acted in good faith to spur residential development in Boulder County. Fast forward 23 years, and my parents, my entire community, are wondering what happened. The town received no notice of this meeting or the earlier meeting that was held in May and has continued to today, in spite of being less than a half mile away from the influence zone as noted in the maps. And Superior is even in Jefferson County. This is not a cross-county confusion thing. The edge of Jefferson County actually includes Superior. Further, there are a number of factual inaccuracies, as noted earlier in the application, that need to be addressed. One could argue that notice doesn't need to go past a county's borders, but I wish airplane noise did not go past a county's borders. Expansion of the airport operations will have a material impact on our community outside the airport land use zone, but in the skies. In the past, Superior and Jefferson County have been great neighbors. When Highland Natural Resources wanted to frack under Rocky Flats in late 2018 and site the pads in Superior, but on the edge of Jefferson County, we all worked together to push back on that plan. That piece of land is now designated open space, and Jefferson County actually helped us purchase that in 2021. It's clear that more dialogue is required here, and I ask you to vote the application down and provide staff direction to correct the erroneous aspects of the application. At a minimum, I want to stress that this will have a material impact on the health of our residents that abut the airport. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any questions for the speaker from the Planning Commission members, both in the hearing room and online? Thank you for your comments, sir.
My name is Roger Clem, ROGERKLEMM. I live in Lake Arbor, Arvada. Thank you for taking the time to hear us tonight. Realize that you folks are bound by law, by word, but I'd like to speak to you a little bit about meaning tonight. Those who have come before me have pointed out that everybody is doing their job, but we're still surprised. Everybody here found out at the last minute, and we have not had a chance to put together something worthy of the time it takes to consider this issue. And I would plead for at least that in the conclusion of this, that we have a delay to be able to do a proper preparation, if not for a rejection of this proposal. I own a hangar at what was Jefferson County Airport, now is the Metropolitan Airport. The meaning of this rezoning proposal is to convert this airport from a community county airport into a metroplex general or civil aviation hostile environment. It is for commercial aviation. The purpose of the rezoning has to be considered very deeply. The effect it has on those of us who base our aircraft at the airport is that we are going to be incurring huge increases in the price of doing so. As such, general aviation will be driven out of this airport, which is antithetical to the FAA's stated purpose for the airport. And I have been involved since 1985 in fighting for that general aviation purpose. We went out there during the Reagan administration and flew repeatedly so that the control tower would not be taken away from the airport and it would not lose the funding associated with that status. We are there now, and we have been for decades trying to make aviation available and affordable for the general public, which is the true purpose of this airport. Rezoning is the sheep's clothing of accomplishing the expulsion of general aviation from this facility. And to bring in larger aircraft will produce the result that the people who have spoken before me are concerned about. They're cutting right straight to the chase. That's where we're headed with this, is to bring in the heavy metal, the kerosene, the big noise, the scheduled airliners, and that is not really the purpose, I think, of this airport. To be a reliever of DIA is directly in the target zone for this proposal. I will leave it to my fellows to provide you with some details on my conclusions here.
Thank you for your comments. Mr. Clem, any questions for the speaker?
Yes, if I understood correctly, you are recommending that we either deny this case or extend it?
At the very least, extend, yes. This is a taking of about $3 million from the people who are using the airport as I currently see it, as it will result in a relocation of facilities that will be at their expense.
May I ask, what are you hoping to accomplish with an extension?
Time to prepare a sharper figure than $3 million plucked out of midair, and to give you a better focus on the admittedly hand waving that I've done here. I mean, we're We're talking about concepts, not word of law, not dollars and cents. This proposal appears to make sense on its surface when you talk about rezoning, but it's really about dollars and the purpose and the spirit for the very existence of this field, which my previous speakers have, I think, focused on, is that it will undoubtedly become a commercial operation, not a general aviation operation.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the speaker? Yes, Commissioner Duncan?
Mr. Clem, did I hear you correctly? You said you own a hangar, 4 hangars at the Metropolitan Airport.
Yes. We purchased those hangars because the airport did not have adequate hangar facilities for the people who wanted to use them, and it never has. It's always had an extensive waiting list for people who have a lot of capital tied up in expensive aircraft and don't want them sitting out in the wind and the hail and the conditions that this airport is notably infamous for.
So you operate them for airplane storage?
I do.
Okay. And have you,
at a very, very small margin. I don't do it for the money. And you will have an opportunity to ask one of my tenants whether or not that's the case. I mean, it's not for the money. It's for general aviation.
okay, thank you. And have you had a chance to discuss your concerns with the airport leadership?
I have not, because I did not realize that this zoning was going to be the mechanism by which I would incur $200,000 worth of expenses for no purpose other than to advance commercial aviation at the expense of general aviation.
You're just finding out about it?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions from the commission members? Thank you, sir. Appreciate your testimony.
Jake Gasper.
And before you get started, for the purpose of clarity for the folks in the audience and are participating online who haven't had the benefit of reviewing the document you handed out, can you describe that before you get into your testimony?
Yes, sir.
Briefly.
The first page is an early draft, which the case manager had written up, and then this was postponed. I just wanted to point out something that was written on that first earlier draft and compare it to the second page where it's no longer there and make up just a minor point on that. The last page talks about the architectural of what we're going through here this evening. It addresses new aviation buildings and it addresses existing buildings. And okay, as far as what the existing buildings, if you look at the third page, ladies and gentlemen, that starts off with modifications of existing buildings in the areas that face Sims and all those other roads. And then it talks about existing aviation uses to be consistent with the color and materials of the existing structure. I don't know of any existing buildings along those roads. I may be wrong. You know of any? So
Sir,
I would like
for the purpose of clarity, we're going to focus on your comments tonight and your 3 minutes of testimony. That doesn't allow me or the Planning Commission's time to go through and give this document their full attention. It will become part of the public record.
Okay.
It will be included in the process of reviewing this application. But unfortunately, please know that in order to give you our attention, we're not going to be able to look through this document right now.
Okay. What I want to start off with is that I have been flying out of Jeffco since 1966. I've been renting a hangar out there for 28 years. This hangar will now be, in the future, hauled over to this new development. My owner will have to pay $50,000 plus to have that done. So there are 61 of these hangars that will be transported over to the new development. This is real. I tended to meeting with the advisory commission at the airport on May 10th. The agenda was how much would it cost to move the hangars? And that's what the $50,000 figure came in at. The other agenda was what to do with the land that they're going to now occupy, to take away 178 hangars and build bigger hangars for bigger aircraft. I say 178 because there's 117 county hangars that the FAA paid for years ago that they're also going to destroy, not move. So that's 178. The exhibit on page 1 talks about the FAA Assurance Program, Section 22, Part A. And I want to point out one thing why this is no longer on the final draft. Discrimination. $50,000 per person or hangar to move those hangars and turn around and put in hangars where they were moved from, in my opinion, is discrimination. I will not get into the 117 other renters that are going to be displaced, but as far as where I'm concerned, this is what is going to happen. As I earlier mentioned on the back, the director is not transparent. He's calling these existing buildings, they are actually those hangars that are going to be moved. He's playing games with us in the fact that there are no existing buildings on that property right now, and he's calling existing buildings because down in the future, when he has the opportunity to move those hangars from the north side to the south side, then he's going to use that right here in this wording as the existing buildings. Read my time. You might out of time. I can't.
No, you're okay. Take a few more minutes.
Okay, got
Finish
it.
up.
The airport community, those 61 hangars, those people that own those hangars or rent those hangars, were never given any notice of this. And I talked to the manager of this, case manager, and I understand the situation. We weren't part of where we were included, but we had no idea what was coming down the pike and no opportunity to make public comments before any of this was drafted. I feel that there should be a neighborhood meeting called for the pilot group over there. You have 61 hangars and a lot of individuals that are directly going to be affected by what is taking place tonight. And they have had very little say in this whole procedure. A neighborhood meeting and also a continuance. And the bottom line would be to put in this draft that only new development, no moving hangars, no old hangars being moved over there simply because the director doesn't like the way they look. Those hangars have been there for many, many years. The paint on them is good. They look good, and they'll last for another 100 years. They're steel hangars, so they don't deteriorate.
If you could summarize your comments, please.
Okay, and thank you very much for your time.
And just for clarity, the document you referred to as a draft are your comments to the building standards that were provided by the airport. Is that correct? Thank you. Sir? Let's make sure that the Planning Commission members don't have a question for you. We'll give them an opportunity to ask questions. Are there any questions for the speaker? Thank you, sir. Appreciate your comments.
My name is Charlene Willey, W-I-L-L-E-Y. Before I begin, real quickly, I apologize. My remarks are not usually as tidy as they normally are because my power went out this afternoon. But because I had just learned about this meeting about 24 hours ago, I've been scrambling. So I apologize if I'm a little disorganized. Once again, we find Jefferson County pushing forth.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Sorry.
Could you lower the microphone a little bit? We want to make sure everybody can hear you.
There we go.
Thank
Is
you.
that better?
Yeah.
Once again, we find Jefferson County pushing forth with reckless and secretive plans for expansion of Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport. I have lived in Jefferson County for most of my life, but for the past 30 years, I've lived in Green Knolls, a neighborhood that is near to the airport. In fact, my neighborhood, which I have only learned recently, is in the critical zone of the airport. So it's remarkable to me that the prediction for any change at that airport would be negligible. There's a whole neighborhood of folks like me living in the critical zone. That decision was made in 1979 by the Jefferson County Commissioners over the Planning Commission's strong objections and the strong objections of the FAA, because you shouldn't put people in crash zones. So that's how this airport has been developed, and I see a strong pattern of continuation of the same kind of reckless and secretive plans. 5 years ago, in 2018, as traffic from this facility grew, residents from surrounding communities began searching for places to express their concern. 4 years ago, in 2019, Superior and Louisville hired a consulting firm after a community survey showed that increasing traffic from this airport was a significant concern for their constituents. That's when most of us found out that Jeffco should have engaged in a master planning process. It's an FAA-designed process. Believe me, the deck is well stacked in the favor of the airport facility before they made any more significant changes. And that is when we started pleading with them to follow a master planning process. In fact, over 1,700 people signed a petition 2 years ago asking for this process to begin. We were ignored. And since then, the amount of piston engine traffic, the ones that burn leaded aviation gas, has nearly doubled. We are here tonight because Jeffco wants to make its now most egregious move and avoid the proper notice and planning. It wants to tear up a runway and fully develop surrounding vacant land in ways that would permit development for the infrastructure of a commercial or freight or both kinds of traffic. You've heard from the other GA air interests tonight. Those folks beg them not to dig up that runway because it's actually a significant safety feature for them. Many, many stories were told by these pilots about how important that was. And yet we find tonight that there's this surprise meeting to actually finalize it. I'm sorry, am I out of time?
I'm afraid you are. Maybe you would quickly summarize your comments.
Yes, I will. I think that unfortunately, I have become a classic case for the health impacts of this airport. I recently tested very high blood lead levels at a critical level, and my doctor was baffled because she didn't know the source. In addition, I've developed other conditions that one is normally would see in people who are exposed to chronic noise. So the impacts are real today. Please don't allow this. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any questions for the speaker? Thank you, ma'am.
Morteza Karimzadeh, Town of Superior. Thank you for this public hearing today, albeit I think it was not as well advertised as a public hearing can be. I'm a resident of Superior, West Yarrow Circle. I'm a university professor, researcher, scientist at CU Boulder. I'm here to implore you to deny this request and this proposal. I live in South Rock Creek, just around 2 miles from the end of the runway, but the impacts of this operation and proposal on my community have not been considered from what I've seen in the document in my haste. I found about this hearing only this afternoon, so I'm here to present my quick thoughts. I'm running on perhaps 4 or 5 hours of sleep, 3 nights in a row. The reason being usually 2 airplanes fly over my house every 2-3 minutes. And if you would like to visualize that, imagine not being able to hear each other as you're speaking with the windows closed. Imagine the kids waking up, the pets being nervous, you always having a headache. You might be tempted to think, well, homes in that neighborhood have an avigation agreement, an easement, so if you don't like, sell and move on. I want to remind everyone here, and I don't think I'm breaking news here, following multiple failed attempts to have Jefferson County and the Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport to hear a resident concerned, the Rock Creek Master HOA had to sue the airport. A couple of years ago, Senior District Court Judge Stephen Enderlin Howard wrote in the bench trial order, the court found that the contours of the 1988 master plan have been exceeded by the sustained operation of aircraft as shown by the contours provided in the 2010 master plan. The airport has been putting off completing a new master plan, as the previous gentlelady just referred to, only because most likely, I think, they don't want to study the noise. The said lawsuit has gone through appeals. The appeals court upheld the lower court ruling. So if you don't believe the residents and their concerns, perhaps this court ruling can give you pause that the airport has been in constant violation of its avigation easement and agreement. And I also noticed the commission did not really ask questions of the residents, but just that one gentleman who had owned a hangar at the airport. I hope the the commission is hearing residents and their concern, and I hope there is at least curiosity to stay faithful to the spirit of the law, which does require studying public health and impacts on the neighboring communities. This does include a community just a mile and something from the end of the runway, which airplanes used to take off over. I thank you for your time, and again, I request that you deny this proposal.
Thank you for your comments, sir. Do we have any questions for the speaker from the Planning Commission members? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
My name is Lucy Smith. I am not a speaker at all. I don't have anything prepared, so I'm just gonna go for it. We moved to our neighborhood 33 years ago. I knew the airport was there. Planes, was used to them going by, not a big deal or anything. Like the sounds of them. Went to a lot of the meetings at the airport, and they always said there'd be no scheduled airplanes, scheduled service and that, and there'd never be the big commercial planes. So we decided to stay in our neighborhood. It has gotten so bad. It's like one lady said, you cannot sit in your backyard sometimes and visit at all. On June 12th, my son's birthday, I was taking a walk with my husband who's here. So you can look at the logs at Rocky Mountain National Airport from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Our neighborhood only has 150 homes. 31 planes went over our little neighborhood in 1 hour. 31. That's not the ones going around our neighborhood. That's going over our neighborhood. And I'm just concerned about the noise. Like I said, we knew the airport was there. Didn't have a problem with it, but I am very concerned about them having, the longer runways and having the scheduled commercial airplanes. It's really scary. And the lead problem and stuff like that. I think it's sad we all even have to be here. I think it's sad that not enough people knew about this meeting, that they could come and be prepared for it. I just think the whole situation's sad. We shouldn't even have to be here. It was supposed to be just a small airport. And that's what I was told many, many years ago in the 1990s when I would go to the meetings at the Jefferson County Airport. Also, one last thing is, how much space do I own above my home? I'd like to ask, because some of those planes are so low. I know I could take a baseball, throw it up, and hit the bottom of those planes. They're pretty darn low when they're practicing. That's scary too. They shouldn't be that low, so what are they dropping down in our neighborhood? That's it. Like I said, nothing prepared. I wasn't even going to speak, but I don't know. I'm just wanted to say something. So thank you. Are there any
Thank
questions?
you for your comments. And I'm glad that you did speak, and I'm sorry that you're sad about your situation, but please know that everybody matters or nobody matters. You being here is important to us.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions for the speaker? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lindsay Waskey, W-A-S-K-E-Y, and I am a resident of Superior living in the Rock Creek neighborhood. Sure. So in short, I'm here to ask that you deny our MMA's application. I have strong concerns about the airport's current operations and even greater concerns about its apparent wish to continue to grow. As you've heard from my neighbors who live in South Rock Creek, they report near constant noise from planes affecting their welfare. And even more concerning to me is that there have been several reports of homes with lead that likely due to the heavy flight traffic over the neighborhoods. And most concerning to me is that there have even been reports of children being exposed to lead and the possible cause being the heavy flight traffic over the homes. And I'm sure that we can all agree that children under no circumstances should be subjected to lead. Moreover, as has been kind of touched on in this hearing, Superior was not properly notified of this meeting. I don't know the specifics of this, nor do I know how far Superior is from the 1 mile marker, but I do know that the intent of that notice is that affected communities need to have proper notice. Superior is certainly impacted. I don't think that comes as a surprise to anyone here, specifically including our MMA, our HOA, the Rock Creek HOA is sued. The airport and residents file lots of noise complaints, so we should have been given notice, and I have no doubt that more residents would have turned up for this to express their opinions here tonight had they been given notice. Lastly, I think it's clear that, in my opinion, additional growth is certainly not compatible with the surrounding neighborhoods, given the health and the welfare impacts that we've heard tonight. Please deny our MMA's application. And I'd like to reserve my 55 seconds for anyone else that would like to speak more tonight.
Your 3 minutes are specific to you, ma'am. Each individual has a specific amount of time. Thank you for the offer, though.
Yep.
Does that complete your testimony?
It sure does.
Okay, let's see if we have any questions from the other commission members. I don't believe so. Thank you for your testimony.
Hello, my name is Laura Skwadzinski, S-K-L-A-D-Z-I-N-S-K-I. Great. My name is Laura Skwadzinski. I live on the south side of Superior, where I love running the trails on Coyote Ridge, literally steps from this proposed expansion. A few times a month, I run from my house to the current airport, a testament to just how close even the current airport is. And I love running around the airport grounds with my dog, Sadie. I'm a former trustee for the town of Superior, and professionally, I've worked for over a decade as a management consultant for the airline industry. I'm certainly a supporter of aviation, but this proposal has a number of errors in it that you need to address before moving forward. First, I was very disappointed that Superior wasn't included in the list of interested or impacted parties, and there were no emails in the packet indicating that we had even been contacted. We are less than half a mile from the proposed expansion, and we consistently participate in the airport roundtables. This feels like a blatant omission by the applicant not to solicit our comments. Second, I vehemently disagree that there are no negative impacts on the surrounding area with this proposal. It's inconceivable to me that this proposal will have the same or less noise impact as the existing plan. If air traffic is expanding, as it's already done dramatically, we'll have major impacts on both noise and health in Superior. Finally, my understanding is that a lawsuit between Superior and RMMA was ruled in favor of Superior, that RMMA has violated the avigation easement that limited its growth and impacts on Superior. I understand this case is being challenged, but it seems to me to be disingenuous to expand the airport when a judge has ruled that the avigation easement has already been violated. I bought my home in Superior 9 years ago, and I was delighted to be moving in by a small regional airport. For years, I enjoyed the planes, but in the last few years, traffic has increased dramatically and the impact has become unbearable. While one person commented that the planes start at 5 a.m., I now regularly get woken up in the middle of the night at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., and 3 a.m. And I'm not a light sleeper. I moved here from Manhattan. In spite of installing a whole house fan to try to minimize my impact on the environment, I now have to sleep with my windows closed, and yet my family and I still can't sleep through the night. This will only get worse with the proposed expansion. Our Superior Town Board sent a letter to the Jefferson County Commissioners and Director Paul Anslow with suggested remedies for the current problems. I would like to see these addressed and discussed before an expansion is considered. Please either deny this application or extend it until the lawsuit and the requests in the current letter can be addressed. And if an extension is granted, please ensure that the grave errors in the application are addressed and that the Town of Superior is noticed so that more of my neighbors can be made aware of this issue to share their feedback with you. Thank you so much.
The next step in the hearing would be for the applicant and for the case manager to address these questions and concerns we've heard from the community. But what I'd like to suggest is that we take a short 10-minute personal break and allow the applicant and the case manager to put together your notes on this wide-ranging set of questions and concerns that we've heard the community that we'd like you to address. So if I can ask our host to pause the hearing for the next 10 minutes, we'll take a personal break.
Would it be all right if I addressed a few things first?
If that's your preference.
Okay. To start off, I just want to reiterate the proposal with the location and extent and what that entails. It does not include expansion of the property. It follows uses that are already allowed at the property through the ODP, which is the zoning document. So just to clarify that aspect, and I'll let Ben clarify that further later. The other main item I just wanted to clarify was the notification. So with a location and extent, a referral is sent out to external agencies. That includes any town or city or county within 2 miles. That was done in April, and there was an email sent to the Director of Planning and Zoning with the Town of Superior, and we received no comment at that time. So I just want to clarify. In addition, postcards are mailed out to all adjacent property owners within 500 feet. So that is how that noticing is done. And then signs as well have to be posted on the property. There were 6 signs and postcards sent out in May before the May hearing. That was continued to a date uncertain. And so there were new signs and new postcards put out 2 weeks before this meeting as well. And that follows standard county regulations. The last thing is that with a location and extent, that is a Colorado state statute that we must follow for their regulations. That requires these meetings for locations and extents to be within 30 days that it goes to Planning Commission from acceptance. And that can only be changed if the applicant accepts that we are extending that process. And that happened with the May 24th meeting that we ended up prolonging this. So it's already been outside of that 30-day period.
Thank you. I'll come back to that after we've heard responses to all of the questions from the community, from both yourself and the applicant. I'll turn it over to the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Planning Commission. You just heard a lot of the kind of issues and community concerns that we face running a significant general aviation airport in an urban area. And we don't at all dismiss those concerns. The airport cares about its impacts on the surrounding communities. We formed and support a community noise roundtable in 2021 that is doing ongoing work to address noise, identify possible solutions to that effect. And that work is ongoing. The FAA is engaged and there's a consultant working in that process. But I think tonight we had a lot of conflating issues related to what is in effect a lot in building standard issue or application here before you. This is not a plan to expand the airport. The borders of this location and extent are within the borders of the 2020 overall or official development plan for the airport. That official development plan lists a whole host of aeronautical uses that exist on our airport or could exist per FAA grant assurances. For example, one of those is air cargo is already an allowable use and could be in for a site development plan tomorrow for Jefferson County. So this is not an expansion. We have had ongoing conversations at the Jefferson County Airport Advisory Board about conceptual planning for the airport. We are tied back to a master plan that was done in 2011. And that plan shows development on the south side of the airport that is consistent with this location and extent and consistent with the official development plan. And as Sim Street is being relocated this year, and as we construct a taxiway next year, that has been shown on previous master plans and part of this existing location extent, we expect that there will be interest in developing on the south side of the field, consistent with what else is on the airport. And so you've probably heard comments about relocating general aviation hangars. We have conceptual discussions about what is the right type of use where on the airport, just like a city has discussions about comprehensive planning in their community. And there happens to be a smaller runway on the south side of the field than on the north side. So for us, conceptually, it makes more sense to locate smaller general aviation hangars on the south side. However, there's no imminent plans to relocate hangars. There's discussions of what if general aviation hangars, to include the county T hangars or other individually owned hangars, are relocated. What would the cost be? We don't see that happening within the next 5 years. And this location extent doesn't make that more possible than it already is possible. What it does do for the general aviation stakeholders here in the room is make it more affordable to build additional general aviation hangars. And I have the example that comes to mind is we have 6 small box hangars being built on the field right now, and they happen to be in a little rectangle that is on the existing location and extent. That developer is having a very kind of easy process to go through to build 6 box hangars that'll serve the needs of general aviation. There's a similar...
Can I interrupt you for a quick second? For the benefit of those who aren't familiar with your description of the airport and the structures there, do we have a graphic anywhere in the staff report that we could bring up for the community and for the commission members that reflects the current development on the airport and those hangars? If not, that's fine, but I'm just looking for some clarity here that might make it easier for us to follow your comments about moving buildings and structures north and south.
I can see if I can pull up something from the staff report. Otherwise, we can pull up the GIS map that just shows the outline of the site, if that would be helpful.
Well, there is one in the staff report that it was such a large file I couldn't open it. That one. I couldn't open that. It took too long for my computer to open that. I wanted to print it, but does this help you to describe
I would like
the
to go to
south
page
and
81.
I thought it was 85, but it could be 81.
The one with the 2016 version of this. There you go.
Thank you. I apologize for my ignorance, but I want to be able to follow your thought process here.
So the section shown in blue on the south side of the field is where we would expect some development to start occurring as that road, which is Sim Street, is relocated further south as part of the Verve Innovation Park development. As that's relocated, we have a capital project to extend the taxiway towards the south. And that will allow us to relocate or build new general aviation hangars on that side of the field. That orange line you see is our south runway, and it's narrower and shorter in length than the one that's is asphalt and kind of shown, it looks more black. And so looking down the road, yes, it makes more sense to relocate general aviation over there or build new general aviation over there. And we continue to be a general aviation airport, and we hope to continue to serve that market. So the example I was giving is that triangle in purple on the upper left. There is a project in right now that's building 6 box hangars there. We're essentially out of room right now in terms of building on the north side of the field, but someone found a little bit of property that they said we could squeeze some hangars in here, and they're going through that process. On the other side of the field where that blue is, just to, I would say, the northeast corner of it, there is a similar vacant rectangle where you could also squeeze 6 box hangars in. That is not part of this 2016 location and extent, and they go through a different permitting and review process. Same type of product, and I have the benefit of having not worked at this airport in 2016, so I can't explain why the purple triangle was identified for development, but that other vacant piece of property was not. We go by the master plan we have and by the overall or the official development plan from 2020, which shows that we're an airport. We have a lot of land to develop, and those are the allowable uses listed. So that's how we work going forward. And I will say, when there is a proposal to develop something, it still has to go before the Jefferson County Board of County Commissioners, either as a ground lease or some sort of contractual negotiation, or if it's a capital project, the board has to sign off on it in terms of a construction project. So those are still review steps that happen through the Jefferson County process and go before the Board of County Commissioners. So that's really the intent here, and we're surprised, or I think this has been misconstrued to be a goal to redevelop the airport, expand the airport. But if you go back to that 2020 official development plan, that really sets the boundaries and the allowable uses. And so we're just trying to make it consistent across the airfield rather than being tied to this map that was developed in 2016. And I could point out there's a lot of projects on this map, number 17, number 21, that we don't intend to build. It's no longer on our capital improvement program, and we don't intend to build. Meanwhile, number 3, which is the red crosswind runway, was recently brought before the Board of County Commissioners, and we recommended decommission of that runway. The project on this plan shows probably rehabilitation of that runway, but the pavement is failing, and the airport does not think it's a wise use of resources to reconstruct a runway that's used for less than 1% of operations. So you can kind of see the steps we're working through as we go through the permitting process of Jefferson County, how this map doesn't always make sense to us as something that's inherited from previous administration, and then superseded by a 2020 overall or official development plan, and just all the kind of conceptual and master planning and capital improvement planning we do on an annual basis. So we hear residents about noise and operations, but this is not allowing the airport any more operations than currently exist or can be built as part of the official development plan. It would just come through as a site development plan, perhaps, rather than some other sort of permitting process. I think that's all I've got.
Okay. I'll now ask our case manager if you'd like to address the questions you've heard from the community.
I think they're primarily things that I touched on earlier. I will say all of the noticing is done by Jefferson County, not the applicant. So the applicant does not choose who gets noticing. That was something I didn't mention earlier, but I'm happy to answer any questions as well.
Thank you. So at this point, what we'll do is allow the commission members to review the comments we've heard from the community and pose their questions to staff and to the applicant and discuss their views on this application. Do I have any questions from Commissioner Spencer? Raise your hand.
Oh, thank you. Just kind of curious about this lead situation, even though it's really not a part of the application. People refer to this lead poisoning and lead poisoning here. What's happening with this lead? What does that mean? Where is it coming from, and how is it actually determined? How can you actually find out if there's lead in the soil versus lead in the air versus what was there, versus what the airport's causing? Can either of you help me with that? I don't know what people are talking about, lead poisoning. I'm sorry.
Commissioner Spencer, Kathy Parker, Assistant County Attorney. I think I can help you with that.
Thank you.
Just briefly, the FAA regulates fuels used in aircraft, and lead is resulting from that fuel. And so the county doesn't regulate the lead, the FAA does.
So basically it's lead from the burning of fuel in the air that somehow is floating down on the people then beneath it. Is that correct?
It's outside of something we can regulate.
Thank you. So I'm just curious about what the deal is. Thank you. I didn't even know what they were talking about. So
yeah, I can add to that. I was a little hesitant because I'm not a scientist and cannot speak to how lead particles, end up in the air or the soil or vice versa. But yeah, general aviation airplanes have been running on leaded avgas since, I don't know, the 1920s or maybe even earlier. There's been an initiative. It's one of the last industries that's still burning leaded fuel. And we don't like it, and we can't wait till it's phased out. It's something that kind of needs to be done nationwide as an industry, because those aircraft engines are highly regulated by the FAA in terms of what fuels they use. And I think the good news there is we're probably, certainly within 10 years and hopefully sooner, of actually having a new fuel that those engines can burn that does not use lead. But it's not something, the airport does not sell leaded fuel. There are 2 fixed base operators, they're called, on the field that do sell fuel to the customers on the field, and that's who provides that product.
Thank you very much. And I think that's all the questions I have for now, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Spencer. Commissioner Becker?
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple questions. Actually, I have a bunch, but I'll start with a couple. So general aviation and permitted uses, has that always been the case? You're talking about FAA permitted uses and general aviation. Has that changed over the years?
No, Jefferson County, but formerly Jefferson County Airport, which opened in 1960, has always been a general aviation airport. I think when you mention general aviation uses, people are typically talking about small hangars for the storage of general aviation aircraft. And yes, we've had those, and they're allowed on the field.
So permitted uses?
Correct.
By the FAA, has that changed over the years?
No.
So we heard comments about originally it was freight only, or?
There was discussion of an avigation easement that was signed between the developers of Rock Creek and Superior and the airport at the time, airport management at the time, that had a number of stipulations, and it ended up in a lawsuit between Rock Creek and Jefferson County. I am not very familiar with that lawsuit. That's handled by a different staff member, so I don't want to hypothesize, but one of the stipulations would be that the airport does not have air cargo operations or something to that effect. We do not have air cargo operations. However, it is not prohibited by, it's an allowable use currently in our official development plan.
It's a permitted use.
It's permitted, yes.
Okay. So do you have information on volumes, like aircraft volumes, the number of flights per day, and how that perhaps has increased over time or stayed the same, or what are the numbers?
Yeah, so the FAA keeps track of counts through the air traffic control tower. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but we have probably now exceeded our highest annual operations. Previously was actually back in the 1970s. We were on the 240,000 annual operations. An operation is a takeoff, a landing, or a touch and go. Basically, anytime an aircraft leaves or hits the runway again. And we're now, I think, trending towards maybe 280,000 operations, and that's increased significantly since the 2010 timeframe. And so that's what people are feeling who've moved into the community lately or moved into Superior or Westminster since maybe 2000 there's definitely been an increase since 2000. And that's just, a growing economy and a growing market here. And another big component of that is a strong demand for commercial pilots, and there are flight schools on the field who are providing that service, that career training service that's generating numbers.
So follow on to that then, do you have information on capacity, or that number, where is that relative to what it could conceivably be?
Sure. The one tricky thing that we're always explaining about the airport is that the airport, as in Jefferson County, does not regulate the airspace. When an aircraft enters what we call the movement area, it's under the command, or it's under the control of FAA air traffic control. And they control who gets into the airspace, when they can land, when they can take off, that sort of thing. There is kind of theoretically a natural limit to how many aircraft can use an airport during a year. And Centennial, which has a very similar runway configuration as us, has had operations in the 300,000s. And I feel like they probably feel like they're kind of at their natural limit, because at some point as a pilot, you're waiting for 30 minutes to take off because the traffic pattern's too busy or there's too many aircraft landing. But it's not like a limit that we set.
Okay, thank you. That's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from our commission members?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Duncan.
Yes, thank you. So just to get very specific, I mean, you're saying this application is not changing the uses. You're making an application for a reason. Otherwise, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. So what is it that this application is going to allow the airport to do that it can't do without it?
So the example I gave earlier, where one hangar developer comes in and he goes through a land disturbance permit and a building permit, and he's off and building, versus another developer who's on a different part of the field and was not on that 2016 map for future development. He goes through a site development plan, and that adds months to the process for development. So there's that side of it, of just kind of, we think development should be treated fairly if it's occurring on the airport. So there's that part. There's also having the flexibility on the capital improvement plan. When we look at that 2016 map and see how much things have changed, and we're like, oh, we need to redo this. And we know that our capital improvement plan changes year over year almost in discussions with CDOT Aeronautics and the Federal Aviation Administration. So we would prefer not to be tied down to one shot of a map that goes for 5 to 10 years, because we know it's a fluid thing based on needs and pavement maintenance and things like that. And the other thing is we allowed for emergency access, we added allowable uses for emergency response buildings, i.e. North Metro Fire District, because they are already in existing use on the field. They would like to build a new fire station on the south side of the field to better serve their residents on the south side of the airport. The other one we added was air carrier facilities, because per our FAA airport sponsor assurances, we're not allowed to discriminate against commercial services at the airport, and that was a glaring omission on the previous official development plan. That one wasn't listed. So just to kind of make it a comprehensive list, those were added.
So you're basically just expanding the area that the 2016 official development plan covers?
That the 2016 location and extent covers. It does not expand past the boundaries of the 2020 official development plan. That it's in that same area.
Okay, so it doesn't change the 2016 official development plan at all.
Well, there's a 2020 official development plan.
Okay, 2020. I'm sorry.
It's within the bounds of that. It changes things in a little bit, and for example, it changes the lot and building standards, which is the whole point of a location and extent, is to define the lot and building standards, so you can say, yep, this project falls within that criteria. It's good to go. For example, one thing we kind of struggle with is when a hangar comes in and normal industrial parking requirements are applied to it. You have a 20,000 square foot hangar that's evaluated as an industrial building. It might have 2 people in it and a lot of aircraft. And so we don't want to force someone to build 50 parking spaces and a lot of extra impervious surface that affects stormwater and is just not a wise use of land. So the location extent we're looking at allows airport staff to have the discretion to work with Jefferson County Planning and Zoning and define the appropriate parking outside of the parking requirements for Jefferson County. So there's little tweaks like that we thought were common sense. Another one is architectural requirements, and I should have touched on this earlier. Those perimeter boundaries that have so we're including a perimeter that has higher architectural requirements, basically making hangars that face outside of the airport look better by having different materials and things like that. On the inside of the airport, we're an airport, we're like, if it's a metal building, that's fine. That's what hangars are. No one's going to care. And so to the point of wanting to help the market create new general aviation hangars, we were hoping it would allow a more affordable product, because our current general aviation hangars probably would not meet the higher architectural requirements of the Jefferson County and official development plan standards. They're basically metal prefab structures.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I see the lot and tract and architectural standards there in the application, but you already have I'm trying to summarize this in a way that I can digest it. There is a 2020 ODP, correct? That defines allowed uses, right? And it is supposed to cover a certain area, but your previous location extents does not include the same area. So you're trying to expand it so that the two marry up?
Correct. Yeah, the 2016 LNE took a stab at identifying specific projects and specific areas.
Okay, so you're not changing uses?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have right now.
And just a quick follow-up, you're not looking to amend the ODP?
Right.
Okay. Any other, Commissioner Meyer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quick question, just to make sure I do understand it. Does this application open up the door for commercial flights?
That's a tough one to answer. We as an airport don't feel like we can legally prohibit commercial flights. And this is a long explanation I'd have to get into, but we accept money from the federal government for projects. And as part of that, we are bound by airport sponsor assurances, they're called. And Jefferson County signs these airport sponsor assurances. One of them is that we cannot discriminate against types and classes of aeronautical uses to include commercial air service. And so we would argue that we're already kind of bound to at least consider commercial air service at RMMA. Now, whether it makes any sense, whether we could fit a terminal somewhere on the airport, that's an entire discussion we'd have with the Jefferson County Board of County Commissioners and the applicant, and there'd be traffic studies as part of that. And so it's not like it green lights a terminal. There'd be certainly future discussions on that.
But is it an allowable use at this point to have?
I don't think that was one of the ones that was missing from the 2020 overall development plan. So we put that in there to be consistent with our airport sponsorship.
So that is something that you're adding in?
Yeah, I guess you could say that.
Okay, that's all I needed to know. Thank you.
Commissioner Spencer?
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. I have one additional question. One of the members of the public who testified discussed the forced moving of the hangars and that they would cost them so much money. I took it the airport's not going to be paying to move these, but the owner has to pay for this. Can you address that? Because if you're planning on forced moving these people, it just seems like it's a little bit, it sounds like unfair, but I'd like to hear your side of the story on this.
So I should start by saying there's no imminent plans to move hangars. We've had a lot of discussions about what the airport looks like 5, 10, 20 years from now. And as I mentioned, that south side of the field becomes more of a better use for general aviation because of the runway on that size is more size for general aviation versus the larger business aircraft that we see coming in on the north side that actually needs an IFR, an instrument flight rules approach that is only available on that primary runway. But there are no imminent plans to move. But however, those hangars, the ones that they're referring to, are on month-to-month leases. And in their lease, signed by the owners of every one of those porta-ports, it states that the owners are responsible for relocating those hangars if the land is needed for airport development down the road. They've been there since the 1970s, and they were kind of plopped down on asphalt at the time. And they've been there ever since. And you know, at some point, maybe we will need to redo that area. And at that point, the airport has actually talked about how we partner to help them move. But there are no imminent plans to do so or some sort of strategy to cost share or anything like that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? More other Commissioner Duncan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, now I need to ask the same question that I asked before, because now I'm confused by your answer to Commissioner Meyer. Is this application changing any uses?
Yeah, I'd like to clarify that one because technically we're adding commercial air service facility or something like that and emergency support buildings. I forget the exact term that both of those are you. Both the emergency facilities already exist on the airport. There's a North Metro fire station already on the airport. I don't know how that was, if it would used to be in the ODP and it was removed, but to us, that was a glaring omission. Of course, you have fire stations on an airport. Then the other one to us was always allowed and was just a case of if an airline said we want to serve at Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport, we would probably be liable to a lawsuit if we tried to deny them access to the field just as an outright case. Now, if there's other justifications for denying them, then we can certainly look at that. But yes, it's now an allowable use per the location extent, and it wasn't listed specifically in the overall or the official development plan.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ben, were there any other questions from the other commission members before I dig into my list? Commissioner Lemmer.
Yes, sir. In regards to a previous diagram we were looking at, you were considering or planning on removing one of your runways, and so then you'll be down to the primary runway that's IFR rated and served?
So we currently have 3 runways, 2 parallel runways and one that we call the crosswind runway. And that is the runway that is, the pavement condition is very poor and predicted to fail within about 5 years. In which case, if we can't improve it and we don't have FAA funding to do so, we would close it just because of pavement condition alone. So we kind of proactively went before the Jefferson County Board of County Commissioners last month to have that discussion with them and kind of give them a heads up that we think that runway will not be able to be maintained going forward.
It would serve as a taxiway at the very least, right?
Correct.
And then you have 2 parallel, and doing the math, it's like 350. I mean, so it's northwest, the direction of it. My question really is, can we direct the planes above the flight paths and traffic patterns to accommodate better the surrounding neighborhoods?
That is a great question and one of ongoing dialogue at the Community Noise Roundtable. There are some practical realities to an aircraft operating anywhere at an airport, anywhere in the world, in terms of how they depart and arrive at an airport and how they fly a traffic pattern. It's a standard rectangle kind of everywhere internationally. But we are actually having a dialogue right now with the roundtable in terms of how we could tweak or recommend routes that pilots fly in and out of the airport that would mitigate or lessen the noise impact.
And I think that's an extremely important piece that we need to evaluate and incorporate into this to help the surrounding neighborhoods, because I've actually done a lot of general aviation. Could land a plane if the pilot went down, sort of thing. So I understand, when you're on final approach and how you get there. So the distance of that pattern would be a key piece to this, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Okay. If we could incorporate that, into the next round of discussions to appease and mitigate, I think, what's going on with the neighborhoods, because that's a valid, concern. If you're getting, contamination and noise pollution and disturbance all night, we certainly need to be aware of what, how often the planes are coming and at what time. So there would also want to be a consideration of shutting down airport services at a certain time. So is that been discussed about having a quiet time, some 6 hours or 8 hours? Or I know it's difficult if it's a regional airport, but
so I would say not as part of this application. As I mentioned earlier, the Federal Aviation Administration has exclusive sovereignty over the airspace and how it's managed. You are touching on, I think, some very fascinating national dialogue that's occurring that impacts both our airport and many other airports in urban areas.
Right.
But it's not something where we can unilaterally say, sorry, planes cannot fly from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. or anything like that.
Is there a chance of that being introduced into this dialogue, or?
Not
Is
into
it-
this, not into this dialogue,
yet?
but I would happily welcome that conversation at a national level with the Federal Aviation Administration. I believe there are people pushing to that effect.
I would be glad to join if that comes up. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Lemmer. Mr. Mueller, I had a couple questions for you. So just to clarify, this application for location extent doesn't provide us the ability to address how the airport uses their runways, how often they use their runways, or the size or nature of those runways.
Correct.
And that's an FAA controlled.
The size and nature of the runways, I guess, is something is part of the airport's master plan that was last done in 2011. There's talk of redoing that master plan sometime down the road that would require FAA funding to complete, but at the moment we have no plans to lengthen a runway or expand runways or anything that's not consistent with the 2011 airport master plan.
A couple of the neighbors talked about a notice area that would include an influence zone. I'm familiar with the influence zone is, but I'd ask our case manager if the influence zone is a criteria used for providing notice.
It is not. We followed all standard requirements for notifications with location and extent.
And did we do that on both times when we noticed this hearing?
Yes, yes. The noticing was the same for the May 24th hearing and for this hearing.
And was it consistent for all of our location and extent
Yes.
applications?
Yes.
There was a question about how much of the air above private property owners that they own. And I'll rely on our county attorney, but I believe ad quellum defines the FAA ownership of land at 500 feet above the land, the private property. They only control the land up to 500 feet. Is that right?
I actually don't know the answer to that, but what I do know is that the FAA controls the airspace for flights and guides the flights, and so the airport doesn't control that.
For some crazy reason, I had to
Yes, no,
address
it's
that issue
a
in the
great
past.
question, but
I can add to that per FAA regulations, there are minimum altitudes a pilot should be flying, but there's a big glaring exception to that in that the regulation says, except when necessary for takeoff and landing, pilots will, and unless 500 feet or 1,000 feet.
Okay.
All of the Class D airspace around, the airspace around our airport would be considered being used for takeoff and landing, so minimum altitudes wouldn't apply.
And as I understand, minimum altitude's 1,500 feet without takeoff and landings exception. Is that correct?
I didn't claim to know that legal concept. I don't know.
I don't want to disagree with you, but I think there's an FAR Part 91, and I forget the decimal points that lists like 500 feet and 1,000 feet based on whether you're in congested areas or unpopulated areas and things of that nature.
And I think that also needs to be considered with the flight paths and the neighborhoods. We kind of went back to that same discussion. So good deal.
Another question for you, maybe you can help me understand. We've heard from a number of the community members concerned about notice of this hearing and the lack of outreach on the part of the airport to engage the neighbors in these issues about how the airport impacts them. But then I'm hearing you talk about a community noise roundtable and a Jefferson County advisory board. Can you describe those two groups to me and how they might relate to your role with your neighbors?
Sure. So the Community Noise Roundtable was formed at the beginning of 2021 when, as someone mentioned, the Superior in Louisville initiated this airport noise study because they were starting to feel the impacts of the increasing operations and had specific requests of us to shift flights or do other things. We brought those requests to the FAA, and the FAA said, you need to form a community noise roundtable because it shouldn't be one community telling you to shift flights over another community or things of that nature. You need to have all of the impacted communities at the table together. And so that was formed in 2021, and we've been meeting monthly ever since. to discuss this. And it's been a long, hard learning curve for a lot of communities too, in terms of what the airport and what Jefferson County can control and can't control. But we're actually now starting to do, I think, some of the hard work in terms of where can you route flights and things of that sort. So that's the Community Noise Roundtable. And then the Jefferson County Airport Advisory Board is a group of members appointed by Jefferson County Board of County Commissioners who meet monthly or every other month to discuss hot topics and provide feedback to us in Jefferson County in terms of plans and projects and issues at the airport and provide guidance. And so that's why they were talking about what happens to general aviation hangars and how could you help out a move towards the south side of the field if we ever needed to redevelop the north side.
So for any neighbors or any individuals, either tonight or going forward, that would like to understand how to participate in your community noise roundtable, how would they find that information? Is there a website? Is there a link to that on your website?
Correct. There's a web page on our website, RMMA Community Noise Roundtable will take you right there. Our next meeting is next Thursday evening at 6 p.m. And I think most of the communities and members are pretty plugged into that.
Well, I'm certainly glad to hear that because I couldn't help to be concerned by a number of the comments from the community about the lack of dialogue that the airport wasn't having with the community.
Well, I think they might be speaking specific to this location and extent. And frankly, to us, this was not a very interesting application. We were trying to fix kind of the way different projects were permitted through Jefferson County, but in our minds, it was not changing any long-term plans or the overall entitlements of the airport. So, we were probably kind of taken by surprise at the interest taken in this case.
These neighbors care about the character of how they live, and we can appreciate that, and we're glad to hear those comments tonight. But I came to the same conclusion after looking through 233 pages of the staff report. I think staff and the applicant did address to the best extent possible the conditions for the location and extent. Now, there's a number of issues concerned in the neighborhood beyond this application that this group is ruling on tonight. But I'm glad to hear that there's a mechanism for the airport and the community to have that conversation and continue to have that dialogue. Thank you for that. That's the end of my questions. Are there any other questions for the applicant or for staff before we discuss our perspectives on this application individually? Why don't I start at the end, if you don't mind, Commissioner Meyer? Would you like to summarize your perspective on your review of this application, the comments we've heard from the 9 different community members? I have a list of over 20 questions that have come up that I feel have been addressed to an extent, maybe not to please all of the neighbors, but I appreciate the level of review that we've had tonight of these questions and concerns from the community. Commissioner Meyer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I feel that this application and the issues that have come up from the people impacted by this is a lot greater than what the applicant has realized, obviously. And these people do deserve to be heard. Their concerns deserve to be thought about and evaluated. At this point, really, I feel that there's still a lot of unanswered questions, a lot of very open-ended just decisions that open up the doors for probably a lot of undesirable results for a lot of these people. And I think at the very least, this case might just have to be postponed again, or what am I looking for? The word continued. Yes. To allow, I would say allow more communication with the community. So that's my take on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Meyer. Commissioner Duncan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would concur with Commissioner Meyer's comments that, obviously the town of Superior, the Mayor Pro Tem and former trustee are here requesting more coordination and more discussion around this item. There are a lot of issues around a municipal airport, and especially around this question. We, as the planning commission, are tasked with, you know, a certain set of criteria to measure an application against. And really, my opinion is going to rest on the one fact that this isn't as simple as just making a correction or, you know, marrying up two documents that are dissimilar. To the testimony of the planner, that it is going to change, it is going to make another de facto allowed use that is not there right now, which would be more commercial traffic. Now, there's a whole legal question. We're not lawyers. There's a whole legal question around you have to, or you don't have to. That is not the planning commission's business. But I would say I based on the testimony and the request from the community, I would say that I don't think that the negative impacts upon the community, which is one of the criteria that we are tasked with looking at, has been adequately addressed for this application. So I would not be in favor of approving this. Thank you.
Commissioner Becker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Certainly thank the members of the community that have come to testify here this evening, and understand and feel your concerns and complaints. I visited the site and actually had the opportunity to fly in and out of the airport several times in the past. And yeah, that area sure has grown. Plus, there's a lot of residents that have been there for many, many years. So it's surrounded. And with regard to the community roundtable, noise roundtable, you know, certainly a good it advised, you know, to get involved, continue to be involved. The Jefferson County Airport Advisory Board, certainly another avenue. But my sense is that while I feel your concerns, I feel like perhaps maybe there's another avenue that is more appropriate and that really goes beyond the scope of this location and extents application at this point in time. So my tendency would be to actually approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Becker. Commissioner Spencer.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. I too feel the complaints and concerns of the neighbors, and thank you for coming out and testifying. It's never pleasant living near an airport. I know I was living in the past in Northglenn with planes going overhead constantly, so I do feel for you. I understand that it's gotten busier and things have gotten more and more obnoxious, and I understand that. However, I think the complaints, this is not the forum, well, it's a forum to address it, but it's not really a part of the location and extent to look at the complaints that have been registered tonight. This is, I thought, a fairly simple, in some respects, not completely simple. It's the location and extent to make sure that they can make some changes at the airport a little more easily. It's not going to impact one way or the other as I see it. More traffic, less traffic, there'll probably just be more traffic. Whether or not this location and extent is approved or not, it's still going to be the same. There's not going to be any changes to the problems we're experiencing. Those are more of an FAA working things out with the airport, with the advisory committees. And so I'm inclined to approve this application as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Spencer. Commissioner Stevens.
I would say that I have to agree with my fellow commissioners on both sides of what I'm hearing here. I feel like that it's not extending beyond what they already are capable of. So, or they already had planned. So I am inclined to approve as well. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Lemmer.
This is a darn tough one, I must say. I mean, I'm inclined to want to see the airport be able to make changes it needs to function and, you know, thrive actually as intending to do. General aviation is a big factor. It's the overall amount of traffic, air traffic and noise that concerns me. And I really appreciate the community coming out and putting the time and effort to voice their concerns. I'm inclined to ask for a continuance to actually look at some of these issues we brought up. On the whole, I'm in favor of the whole proposal, and it's just I want to make sure that we've looked at all of the avenues and concerns of the surrounding community. So I'm inclined to look for a continuance.
Thank you, Commissioner Lemmer. And going through my notes of the 20+ questions we've heard from the community, and then laying that on top of my duty to review this application based upon the 5 criteria in the staff report, I'm having a hard time finding a material number of these concerns from the community that relate directly to this application and the authority that I have to review it based upon these standards. And I don't take anything away from the concerns of the community about all of these issues that are bothersome to them. But this forum is to review a location extent application that involves the lot and building standards for the airport. I don't have the authority to utilize these concerns outside of those 5 criteria to make my decision. I'm concerned as an individual, a citizen, with the same issues that the neighbors are. But that doesn't, I can't use that when it comes into my responsibility to review this case and weigh the facts relative to the standards of approval that I'm obligated to use to make my decision. And based on that and reviewing the staff report and responses from the applicant and our case manager, I'm in favor of approving this application for the location extent. And I need to clarify for the benefit of the other commission members a discussion about a continuance. The Planning Commission can elect to either request a continuation or not elect to request a continuation, but it's the sole authority of the applicant to agree to a continuation. And if the applicant doesn't agree to a continuation, there won't be a continuation. But the first step is to have, I believe it's the majority, or is it a supermajority for a continuance? I'm asking our county attorney. Section 8.1 doesn't indicate whether it's a supermajority or a majority.
I think it's just a majority.
Just a majority. So of the 7 commission members, we would need 4 commission members that were in favor of a continuance to pose that question to the applicant. Is that correct?
That is correct, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you.
Does this commission feel on a straw vote that there are 4 members here in favor of a continuance? Asking the applicant for a continuance, which it's entirely up to him to either accept or reject. Duncan, Meyer. Commissioner Lemmer?
I don't believe we will have a majority.
It doesn't appear. We've got 2
Does
now,
not appear.
and including yourself, that would be 3. So,
Close.
Go ahead.
That's it.
Okay. So if I correctly understand the bylaws and the process and procedures of section 8.1 of the zoning regulations, we've addressed this issue appropriately.
I agree.
We have. So there won't be a request of the applicant for a continuance. We've had 2 notices of this hearing, one on May 24th and the one for this hearing that went out to the community. Unfortunately, it didn't cover to the extent that many of the community members wished it would have, but I believe we've met our requirements for proper notification. So we're now at a point after having all of the commission members share with us their perspectives on this case and the comments we've heard from the 9 different speakers tonight, we'll need a motion for either approval or denial. Feel free.
Somebody else was supposed to do that. I move to approve case number 23-108937SA based on the testimony and evidence in the record and provided today.
Thank you. And do we have a second for the motion for approval?
I second.
We have a second from Commissioner Stevens, the motion by Commissioner Spencer. Kimmy, would you please poll the commission?
Commissioner Stevens.
Aye.
Commissioner Meyer.
Nay.
Commissioner Duncan.
Nay.
Commissioner Becker.
Aye.
Commissioner Lemmer.
Nay.
Commissioner Spencer.
Aye.
And Chair Rogers.
Aye. The motion for approval was approved 4-3. Thank you very much for all the community members' input on this, both in person here tonight, online, and for your correspondence that are part of the record that we received in reviewing this application tonight.